Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. Letter 1 to Mrs. Saville, England, St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17 blank. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied the commencement of an enterprise which you have regarded with such evil forebodings. I arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking.
Such are the first few lines of the novel, and they are said by the character Robert Walton in a letter to his sister. Now, if you're only familiar with Frankenstein in terms of the old Hollywood Frankenstein, you're probably not too sure who Robert Walton is, but he's essentially the framing device of the whole novel. He is this Arctic explorer, this young captain who's sailing out into the North Pole in the hopes of discovering some mystical, undiscovered land. But whilst there, he happens across Victor Frankenstein lost amongst the ice, and for Victor, this is the end of his story. He's lost everything and he's just trying to track down the creature. And so Walton brings Victor onto his ship and then bears witness to Victor just regaling the tale of like what brought him here. So essentially the novel of Frankenstein. So as such, he's not really a part of the meat of the story. So in most adaptational choices, it's kind of like, just cut him, he's not important. But he does have a lot of thematic significance to the plot because it ties into this whole man trying to conquer nature and like man's ego and trying to discover what's never been seen before and discover the secrets of nature and all this like lofty ambition, which is a massive theme in the novel.
Yeah, I think he's both an echo of Victor Frankenstein and the creature later on, I think. And what you say about him bearing witness, I think, is very interesting. Because essentially the whole novel is a long, very long letter that he writes back
to his sister Margaret.
Yeah, to his sister.
Although he does say, like, as he begins the like big portion where he's just recounting Victor's story, he's like, this probably won't get back to you before I do, but I'm just gonna write it anyway. It's kind of to the point where it's kind of like, why aren't they just journal entries?
I think you're right, but I think the bigger point about it being a witnessing of the event is also tied to the sort of didacticism of the whole story in the end and the way that it maybe the author wants you to interpret it. I think it's really important that Frankenstein's story doesn't just exist in a vacuum and that it's very consciously seen to be educative. Is that a word? Well, it's seen to sort of teach a lesson to Walton, who then sort of returns at the end and is able to sort of wrap things up again, which is an interesting sort of way of framing the story. And I think it's only something that can be done in a novel effectively, I think. I can see why on film people really don't want to include this section.
There are adaptations where it has been done, but it kind of falls flat, I think.
Yeah, because in a film, the audience is the witness, essentially. So you don't need a stand-in, really, to, like, kind of learn the lessons of Victor Frankenstein.
I think also, like, if you're already making a film of Frankenstein, which is not a massively long novel, but it's, quite action-packed, so there's not a lot of time to spend with Walton, because then the audience is just thinking, like, are we going to get to the meat of the story anytime soon? So, like, he gets condensed for times to the point that he really is just a framing device, whereas, in the novel, he really is a character who you do get to know and who, to a degree, does like learn a lesson and like grows as a person.
Yeah, One other thing that is really important about Walton, I think, is his expressed desire to have a friend. So he talks a lot about how he feels like he doesn't have a friend. He's really wants someone.
All I wanted was a friend.
But he doesn't, like you were saying about this desire to climb up the social ranks, he really feels a lack of kinship with his other shipmates, whether that be because of his social position or, something about his personality. But he's just like really emphasizing, I really want a friend.
Like he values his crew as individuals and does recount little anecdotes about them to his sister to like really show off like the characteristics they have that he think are very valuable and admirable. But he yearns for a friend, not, I don't think necessarily of his own class or like intelligence, but a bit higher, because he wants someone to challenge him and make him better, because I think he does want to climb up and he wants to just be better than, I guess he perceives himself as this young uneducated boy, but he seems to really like want to be like really a man of the world, and like he wants to be wise and brave, and he wants to be a hero, I think, which is not unlike Victor we see later in the novel, who also wants to be a hero, albeit in very different ways.
Yeah, I really like this line where he says, inestimable benefit which I shall confer on all mankind. So that's really his end goal, is to accomplish this great purpose where he's bestowing mankind with a gift, essentially. So he also has this sort of God complex, which we see echoed in Victor. But to a lesser degree, because his is like about discovery, exploration, whereas Victor is like life and death. No.
But even that being said, both of them do lean into the idea of discovering nature's secrets. Like, I feel like, I don't know where it is exactly, but I'm pretty sure Walton does say something to that effect. Something about like just, discovering the uncharted land. That's what I was trying to say before. Discovering uncharted land.
Yeah, I think the line...
creatures and...
I think maybe you're thinking of that line where he says, I want to pursue nature to her hiding places.
Yes.
Or something to that effect.
So yeah, that's Walton, not Victor. I mean, you really could play a game of, like, who said what between, like, Walton, Victor, and even the creature to a degree.
Yes. Hey, I think we should have a game, or, like, in an episode, we should have this game, Guess Who Said This Line from the novel.
That would be fun. Let's do that.
Yeah.
The creature, I think, has a slightly different voice.
Yes.
He whines just as much, though.
They're like three whiny dudes. Really.
Yeah, and the creature is kind of like, he's the most sympathetic, but it's also kind of like, yeah, but you shouldn't kill people.
Oh, spoiler.
Look. I think they know the creature kills people.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I think another interesting thing about the whole friendship aspect is that...
You said it right the first time.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that he and Victor are both very lonely. So despite actually having sort of family connections and I assume friends and colleagues, essentially, something about those two people make them very lonely. I think it's their ambition to stand alone and to have this sort of major discovery. And that's another interesting parallel.
Victor doesn't crave it as much. I think he is definitely a lonely figure, but I don't think he sort of feels any remorse over that until, like, the option to choose to have people around is taken away from him. Because the theme of the novel, he takes everyone for granted.
Yeah.
He's like, he has family and friends and takes them for granted.
I think you're right that it's very interesting that Walton feels like keenly the loss or the loneliness a lot more than Victor does. And I think that really ties in with the whole aspect of the novel, which is about science and discovery that's divorced from social considerations.
I think particularly because Walton is so ambitious, he doesn't just sort of become a captain because he doesn't come from money in the same way Victor does. He actually really like works hard to get where he is, and that's kind of, I think, the big difference between them. But yeah, so he like works for, I think, about 6 years. He works to get to where he needs to be to like run a crew, and he does it because he just is very good at what he does, and he does work hard, but he doesn't have a lot of connections. He does make social connections because one of his crewmates was someone he'd met on a whaling ship. So he does sort of accumulate these connections, but is then laments that he's missing just a genuine, like, passionate or whatever kind of connection with another human being. I mean, it's also partially because he's clearly gay and just doesn't realize. Side note, that's my interpretation. But
Very valid.
Because he's always looking higher, he's always searching for something, and I don't think he knows how to appreciate what he has. And again, that is a theme throughout the novel. It's like not appreciating something good when it happens and always just looking back and feeling nostalgic or looking forwards and like craving something. Because Walton very well could probably have deep connections with like his crew if he sought it, but he's always looking ahead. He's always climbing that mountain.
I think it's just the sort of sense of wanting to acquire more and more is definitely, maybe it can also be tied into, as you were starting to say, the sort of class aspect of the novel is the sort of maybe by analogy, a sort of critique of always striving for something that's just beyond your reach.
Yeah. The novel is a bit vague as to like Walton's class exactly, because there is a real sense that he is trying to climb, and all he says on the matter is that he was self-educated. So like he didn't get any formal education as a child. But that could kind of mean anything. He could have just had a secluded upbringing, but there's really, you just get the sense that he's trying to climb the class hierarchy, but it never really specifies that it's not like a clear started from the bottom, now we're here. Because it could have just been like slightly below the middle.
Yeah, but there is definitely a sense that you were saying he's worked for his position in life, whereas that's not a thing that Victor has to do. Like his social position is pretty assured, if only he would kind of like lean into it. But Walton, you're right, it's a little bit more ambiguous.
I think like if he does have money, that sort of helped, but he did have to put all the work in to sort of get the ship. He couldn't just, he's not wealthy enough to just get a ship and like get crew to follow him.
Yeah.
He had to like learn the trade, get money.
Yeah.
Convince people that he could do what he was planning to do.
And he was also kind of forced to give up his poetry career.
Well, he wasn't forced, he was just not good at poetry.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if he was very wealthy, he could just continue being a poet without being good at it.
What is actually the line where he says he like wanted to be a poet, but like that fell through?
It's a pretty funny line. I can't.
It's a bit of a throwaway line, but yeah, he is to his sister like, yeah, remember that summer I studied poetry? Yeah, that didn't work out, did it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, these visions faded when I pursued for the first time those poets whose effusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in the paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I also might obtain the niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare were consecrated. You are well acquainted with my failure and how heavily I bore that disappointment. But just at that time I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into the channel of their earlier bent. Okay, so there it is.
Okay.
He inherited his like cousin's fortune, and he used that to
Sure.
pursue his seafaring life.
So then you assume he wasn't particularly wealthy before he inherited the fortune of my cousin.
The other thing we've got to say is this is also like a weird throwaway line, but I love it. Is that he got really obsessed with the sea and seafaring whilst looking through his uncle's library and seeing all these books on it. And I'm just going to read the line because I love it. These volumes were my study day and night, and my familiarity with them increased. The regret that I felt as a child upon learning that my father's dying injunction had forbidden my uncle to allow me to embark on a seafaring life. Which I just love because it's such a specific dying request. Don't let the boy near the water. And I just love it because you don't hear anything else on that subject. And
right.
It's kind of a great thing Mary Shelley does. She will just give you like really specific details about something, but then no backstory. It's kind of great.
It's highly like over the top and unnecessary, which is like 90% of this novel. You know, it's just extra. Very extra.
Mary Shelley, extra.
But I think, you know, on a serious note, I think there's a very specific tie in with sort of, how can I say, sort of patriarchal structures, or like the idea of Walton and Frankenstein. Both of them kind of react against the sort of things that they're taught by their fathers. They tend to be very close to their female relatives. And maybe that's like making a broader comment about, I don't know. It's interesting, I think, that both of them sort of specifically go against their father's instructions.
Wishes.
Yeah, because later on you hear about how Frankenstein, he's reading like these old alchemists, and his father says, oh, these are just trash.
Maybe we'll pause and talk about that in the childhood years episode.
Yes, that will be in our next episode. But I think that's an interesting parallel as well. Another thing that I wanted to kind of point to in this opening section is the first view that we actually get of both the creature and Frankenstein. So this is the part where Walton actually describes seeing Frankenstein. So it's comparing him with seeing the creature, and he says, he was not, as the other traveller seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered land, but a European. So I thought that was quite interesting in that with Walton and his sort of exploration themes, like the idea that he wants to discover the unknown, it has quite a lot of, I guess, you could apply a post-colonial type of reading to that. You see that the creature is identified with kind of like a savage or a non-European continents, and that's contrasted with Frankenstein, who is described as being the opposite of that. And then you see kind of Walton's immediate sort of appreciation in a way, or kind of recognition in the European, whereas he immediately sees the creature as somehow not human. I think the creature's described as being larger than a human and therefore sort of immediately dehumanized. And I think that's quite an interesting parallel with if you think about maybe European, I guess, discovery, quote unquote discovery of like the New World and the sort of, you know, the way that they might have seen quote unquote native inhabitants of those newly discovered lands and seen them as savage or, you know, less than Europeans.
I think this is the only point where there's like a colonialist feeling to it, because I don't think the creature is ever, out of that context, referred to.
Don't you think?
In any kind of like, I don't know. I don't think he's referred to quite in this colonial perspective. He's always called a monster, but he's called like a monster, a wretch, a corpse, but like I don't think. I think we'll figure out as we go a bit on, but we should keep an eye out on whether he's ever called a savage or something like he's referred to in those terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you point to kind of just the creature, because I think there is a sense that I think when Victor meets up with him again, that he believes him to be sort of less than civilized and sort of looks down upon him for that. But I think just kind of colonialist themes throughout the novel are quite pronounced, because you do have the creature's interactions with the DeLacy's, and then their interaction with Safi. And that whole thing is very much rooted in a sort of almost Orientalism or a very interesting colonialist perspective. I think we should talk about that a little bit more when we get to that part. But I think you can definitely see that it's a novel that can be read in very in a like post-colonial reading kind of way.
Yeah, certainly.
And that might have resonances towards, I mean, like a lot of monster stories, it has resonances with people who are the outsider in a way. And, you know, in society, often that's aligned with racial or ethnic outsiders. So I think you can't really divorce it from that sort of perspective. But yeah, maybe something to keep in mind as we go.
Was there anything else we wanted to discuss on this episode or this portion of the novel?
Yeah, so so we've been just referring to this as the gay love story.
Do you mean the only one? This novel is filled with gay love stories.
Yes, but this is the very pronounced.
This is the most pronounced one.
Yeah.
Walton is very admiring of Victor.
Well, we already
and it's framed.
We already talked
framed
about
in his desire for a friend.
Right, a friend. But I think there's maybe a bit of modern bias or whatever we want to call it. Like, it's a bit of us kind of I don't know like enough about what male friendships were like in the 19th century. Maybe they were just a lot more like openly affectionate. Like it was a lot more important.
Of like higher classes, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, dude bros all throughout this novel go the extra mile.
Well, yeah, they do. It's It's actually interesting to think about a lot of the male friendships as being so sort of caring and nurturing. It's very kind of refreshing, actually.
It's a pity it's removed from every adaptation.
Yeah, because I find it I mean, this is Walton's perspective, and from what we see, he's like really admiring of Frankenstein, and then maybe that will color your initial reading of it, of the novel. I think when I first read it, I was very colored by Walton's perspective, that Frankenstein seemed like a much nicer, likable person than he now seems to me.
Yeah, I think my retake on Victor is, I think he seems a lot more intentionally ridiculous. And, like, I don't know if that's an edition thing, because I read the 31 first in high school. I'm reading the 1818 now. And when I was reading it when I was younger, like, Victor was ridiculous, but it wasn't obvious to me whether that was an intent by the author or if that was just modern sensibilities. Reading it now, I feel like he's intentionally just kind of pompous and ridiculous, and just his actions and then what he says are just like insane. Like, the author is being like, yeah, this guy, he nuts.
He is a little bit nuts, but it seems that Walton's like really appreciative of that. And then it kind of makes you question how much then Walton as the sort of framing device, and then like how much is his perspective then coloring the rest of the novel and his desire to sort of empathize with Victor.
Because I think it is a very maybe postmodern take on this take on this novel to sort of question the narrator's reliability, because I doubt that would have been a thing when Mary Shelley was writing it, or when them rewriting it in 31.
Yeah,
Because I don't think you doubted narrators then.
Yeah, maybe, but you know, like lots of what's that word I can never say? Epistolary. Is that right?
No idea. It's not that it didn't exist, that it wasn't done or like couldn't be done, but it's more, I feel like for the purposes of this novel, you know, the framing device is there for thematic reasons and to just, I think, make the storytelling stronger. But like, I don't know how much room in it, you know, just sort of surface readings of it there is to sort of doubt that this is like a story within a story within a story.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, from a postmodern perspective, that's kind of quite interesting if you, like, really think about this text as someone writing down someone else's story as it's been spoken to them.
Yeah.
And if you want to take realism into it, like, you can't get things down word for word. I think he even says, like, I've done my best to get this down word for word, like, quickly writing it down after, like, hearing him say sections of it.
Right.
And it's kind of like...
It's just impossible, yeah. I mean...
So it's kind of like, yeah, with this novel, it's either suspension of disbelief or questioning whether this is a reliable account.
Yeah, I mean, there's just... I think we were saying how it's just so improbable, and the way that it's written is so, like, Victor's, like, speaking so pompously, and he just seems, you know, it just is really,
They're
really...
very similar voices.
It's just so unbelievable, actually, that this can be done. And I agree that, you know, when it was first published, no one probably would have questioned that it's just the form. It's just an like an accepted trope.
What we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, I think it's an interesting question still to, like, doesn't matter really whether the author meant it or not, but it's
No, once you
kind
put
of-
something out there, it's gone. You can't control it.
Yeah, well, the author
Your
is
intentions mean nothing.
the author is dead, literally. In
Unless
this
the
case.
author is an asshole and you want to boycott their stuff. That's a different topic. Did I make you think about real world problems?
No, never. You can never make me do that. I only think about fictional problems.
When's Snape gonna get his time?
Can we talk about Snape as a Frankenstein adaptation?
Look, you're gonna have to make a very good argument, but I'm not saying no. I'm just saying it's not.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of Frankenstein adaptation in Harry Potter?
Well, I mean, you could say that Voldemort is kind of Victor-like in that he sort of overreaches the boundaries of
Oh,
acceptable.
Victor's such a Slytherin.
Are you calling me a Slytherin or Victor?
Victor's a Slytherin.
Oh, yeah.
You're also a Slytherin.
Yeah, but I lack any personal ambition.
Thus concludes our first episode of the Postmodern Prometheus. Tune in next week when we will hopefully have another episode.
We will be discussing Frankenstein's childhood years and years at college. So that will be fun.
And the college years.
Oh, the college
I wanted to
years.
do them in two separate episodes so you could have like the childhood years and the college years, but that would be a pretty... Oh, look, the amount we talk, I reckon we could stretch his childhood years into like one whole episode, and then, oh man,
We are not
gonna
concise.
Be doing this podcast for a while. Think we'll ever get to adaptations?
We definitely will. Let's live in hope.
I live in hope.
Okay.
Walton is a Slytherin. Clavel is a Hufflepuff. Elizabeth is like probably like a subtle Gryffindor.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth.
Justine's a Hufflepuff. Or maybe
But what
I'm
would
gonna
the
edit that.
creature be?
the creature. Look, he started out life as a Hufflepuff.
No, I don't think.
And
I think
then
he's definitely
the world
a
changed him.
Ravenclaw. I think he just
Oh, that's
overthinks
true.
things a
He
lot.
did teach himself to read.
Yeah. And he's like socially inept. So that's definitely a Ravenclaw thing.
What's Ernest?
Oh god, he's a muggle. No, he's a squib.